Hello, this is Jennifer Parrish, Superintendent of Poquoson City Public Schools. I'd like to share with you a brief update on our budget development process. Please know that all the information regarding this budget development process is currently based on the budget that the governor provided to everybody in December. Let's talk briefly about the budget process. What you see here is we will be talking about the budget in our school board meetings that run from January through March. Also in early January, we do ask for information from our employees so we know whether or not they intend to return to work with us next year. This can impact our budget. On January 30th, we have a budget public forum, so everyone's encouraged to attend if you'd like to share your thoughts on the budget that we're developing for next school year. On March 17th, I will release my proposed budget at a school board meeting, and then on March 27th, the school board will likely approve that budget as it was presented by me or with changes so that we can forward it to City Council by April 1st. Let's just take a little bit of a look back as to where we've come from in terms of budget development. What you see here from fiscal year 10 through fiscal year 20 are some of the major budget actions that were taken. First of all, we had to make approximately $5 million worth of programmatic and personnel reductions because we had to offset the loss of state revenue, which was partly as a result of the recession. We also saw large increases in the VRS rates and other cost increases that we experienced since fiscal year 10. Also during this time period, the City of Poquoson has provided our school division with approximately $1.8 million in additional funding. From fiscal year 10 to fiscal year 13, we had 54.5 positions that needed to be eliminated. It's important to note that this included 11 teaching positions beyond the enrollment loss that we experienced during that time period. Since fiscal year 14, we've had a net increase of 3 positions in the budget, but as you can see here, the 3 positions does not make up for the 11 teaching positions that we cut beyond the enrollment loss. And finally, in fiscal year 12 and fiscal year 13, we did have to eliminate instructional programs because at that time we just had nowhere else to go in terms of the budget reductions that we needed to make. I want to share with you some information related to state and local funding of school divisions. What you see here is a bar graph that shows the change in the share of the state general fund appropriations from the biennium of 2006 to 2008 to now, our current biennium 2020 to 2022. On the far left-hand side, you see the percentage of the general fund that K-12 education received through direct aid. What you see is that since the 2006-2008 school year, we've seen a reduction in the percentage of general funds that comes to us. This is despite the fact that we are now far beyond the recession. We have not seen enough increase in funding to get us to the point that we were at the start of the recession. On the next set of bars, you do see that there's been a large percentage increase in funding from the general fund that goes to Medicaid. Then along the rest of the graph, you see some small increases, or in some cases some small increases, such as the category of other for health and human services. So all other additional categories that you don't see here saw a decrease in terms of their funding from the general fund. But the point I really want to make here is that we still have not gotten back to the percentage of, for lack of a better word, the pie in terms of our share of the general fund appropriations, even though again we're past the recession at this time. Here's a graph that helps show what localities across the state of Virginia have had to do for K-12 education. You see here percentage increases in terms of expenditures or support that has been provided to K-12 education since fiscal year 2009. On the far left, you see the localities have put in more than a 25% increase, yet the next bar shows you that the state increase has been just about 10%. So you see a big difference between local funding and state funding in terms of the growth that we've seen since fiscal year 2009 through fiscal year 2018. You do see an increase in terms of federal funding, but do keep in mind that we aren't able to access as much federal funding as others because of the demographics that we have in our school division. And again, you see the total increase of K-12 funding, but you can see most of that's coming again from the locality, and then for some school divisions, large portions of federal funding. Here's the last graph that I'd like to share with you, and it shows you what the per pupil spending is from direct aid funding by the state. So what you see here, if you look on this graph, is the blue bars represent the state per pupil K12 funding. The orange bars represent what that funding looks like if you take into consideration inflation. So when you look at the orange bars that go across all the way through to our current fiscal year 2020, and then to the second year of the biennium budget, which is now being worked on by the General Assembly and again has been presented by the governor as of December, you can see that we are still even actually below where we were for the inflation that occurred back in 2008 when the recession hit. And actually, there was a greater per pupil cost being paid to school divisions in 2008 than we would even see if they had accounted for inflation in our current per pupil cost. So while there is an increase, again, the per pupil cost that comes out of direct aid for school divisions, with inflation not having been accounted for, it helps to explain why school divisions across the state, to include ours, are still struggling with funding issues. This is going to be the last piece of information I want to share that really gets at state funding. What you see here on the left is a listing of the states and then what the average pay is for instructional positions, with most of those being teachers and some other positions that are related to teaching positions. And this information comes from the National Education Association. On the right, what you see are states ranked by the Zillow Home Value Index for the actual state. So the left-hand side, you see that we aren't even on this first slide in terms of our average teacher salary. However, we are for Zillow Home Value Index. And you see here we're ranked number 17 in the country when you look at the values of our homes. Yet, when you look at our average teacher salary, we're ranked 34th. So we are not even ranked at the national average in terms of how we're paying our teachers. Yet, you can see that housing costs are higher across the state, which connects directly with income of people. Let me just touch briefly on our enrollment projections. You see here for the last 4 years what we budgeted in terms of our enrollment and actually our average daily membership. So keep in mind, enrollment numbers represent the students that are simply enrolled in the school. The average daily membership is literally the average of attendance of students throughout the school year, and that's what we are actually paid for in terms of state funding. So yet another reason it's important to have our students in school each day. You see here for the current school year 2019-2020 that we budgeted for 2,136 students in terms of ADM. We actually currently have enrolled 2,118 students in terms of ADM, so we did fall short of the budget projection this year. However, we are 3 students above what the governor's budget has us having for next year, so I do suspect we'll see even a slight increase above that as we work through our enrollment projections. It is important to know that we won't finish our projections until after we do our kindergarten registration in February. We'd like to try and see how many kindergartners we believe we're having in, because that's an important component in our overall budget planning. So I do encourage any of you who have rising kindergartners to please take a look at the website so that you can find out which days you're able to attend that kindergarten registration program next month. Let's talk a little bit now about our projected cost increases for fiscal year 21. The first one you see here is health and dental insurance, which comes at a cost of over $271,000. Please note that this is based on the estimate of a 12% increase. This is the number that was recommended to us by those in the healthcare industry. We are going out to bid for health insurance, so we are optimistic that we're going to see the percentage come in less than 12%, but we have some work that we need to do before we will know that. I will also mention this notion of health insurance and the possibility of having a less of an increase in terms of cost for us when I get to a later slide. The next item that you see here is the increase in the VRS rate of Virginia Retirement System rate for both the professional group and non-professional group. That comes at a cost to our school division of over $130,000. The next item is a cost increase for instructional needs. So this includes us having another class of students attend the Aviation Academy, in which we partner with Newport News to provide that opportunity to our students. So those students that are rising freshmen this year, will have some of those students will be able to enter into that program next school year. Also, we anticipate some increased costs related to our program of studies. We're going to do some curriculum writing for new courses and make some other adjustments that do come at a cost. And finally, we do need to hire a sign language interpreter, as we are required to meet the needs of some of our students who need to have that service. All of that comes at a cost of over $50,000. Next line item you see here is the increase in contracts and utilities, much like we experience at home. So this includes electricity, gas, and I'm sure some of you can relate to the fact that we are also seeing an increase in flood insurance. All of that comes to a total of over $136,000. Next is the increase in technology. This helps to cover the cost, especially the annual cost or fee for some of the software programs we use to help make us more efficient. Example of this is the software that we use as part of our accounting system, as well as the software that we use to help us track teacher absences, as well as leave and sick leave that all of our employees take. So all of that comes to a cost of over $62,000. And finally, personnel savings. We are seeing some savings here because once we get into the school year, we can see that there is a difference in terms of the costs of some of our new employees versus those that might have retired the year before. So this means our total projected cost increase is over $576,000. So let's talk about the increase in funding that we are going to get according to the governor's budget for fiscal year 21 from the state. So we see that we're looking at an increase of SOQ funding of over $395,000. Again, this is based on the governor's projection of our enrollment, and that likely may change as we go to fine-tune the budget. Also, we're seeing an increase in incentive and categorical funding, which includes games of skill. I mentioned this specifically because it has to do with the next item that you see here on this table. Note that the games of skill are those games that you may see in some of our local stores, also in some of the new venues that have essentially slot machines available for people to play. Well, because of those games of skill, what the state is seeing is a decrease in lottery funds as people play those games rather than doing the lottery tickets. So while we see the increase of over $121,000 in that area, we're actually seeing a decrease in lottery funded programs of over $48,000. So our net projected state funding increase is over $468,000. So those of you that remember the first slide of our cost increases will see that we have cost increases totaling over $576,000. So you see our net projected state funding increase of only over $468,000. So we are at this time projecting a budget shortfall of $107,470 for fiscal year 21. I mentioned earlier about health insurance. We have calculated if we could get the health insurance rate increase from 12% down to 7%, that would mean we would break even here, so we would not have a shortfall. So we are going to remain optimistic by going out to bid that we will see a decrease in the health insurance estimated cost that we have right now. I didn't mention compensation at all because you certainly saw that we were not seeing it as a cost increase for the coming year, nor were we seeing any funding coming from the state based on the governor's budget. And that's because while the governor proposed a 3% teacher pay increase, it is for the second year of the biennium. So it's not for the budget that we're working on currently for the next school year. Always important to note too that while it would in 2 years be a 3% teacher pay increase, it's only for SOQ funded positions. That means that it's only for 67% of the positions that we have in the school division, and the funding actually only goes to 62% of that 67% of positions. The rest of the funding would need to come from the locality. So again, there are no funds for additional compensation in the governor's budget for the coming year. Now there is much discussion in the General Assembly because there is some funding that is available that the governor did not earmark for any specific programs. So there may be a chance that they will move the teacher pay increase up to into the fiscal year 21 budget that we're currently working on, but that remains to be seen, and we'll certainly be tracking that as the General Assembly continues its work. I do want to share with you, though, what compensation costs would look like if we were able to provide one. So if we were just provided a teacher step increase, all of our teachers are on a step plan. So if we moved all the teachers up a step and did nothing else for other employees, that would come at a cost of $109,000. If we simply did a 1% base pay increase for all employees to include our teachers, it would come at a cost of about $161,000. Now, if we did a minimum of a 1 increase for all employees, and this includes teachers on the step increase, so teachers who have a step increase that's greater than 1% would not get an additional 1%, but if a teacher who had a step increase, let's say of a 0.5% increase, then we would bump that to a 1% increase, with all employees not on the teacher step plan receiving a 1% increase, and that would total for us over $200,000. Again, none of this is in the budget at this time, especially because we are receiving no funds from the state. I do want to mention some things that we need to think about considering where our city is themselves with their budget, but I do want to remind you of the support that we've received over the past years. The city of Poquoson did allocate $20 million to support our capital improvement plan, so that is enabling us to do the major renovation and modernization to our middle school. Also supports roof resurfacing as well as new school buses. The city has supported the required local funding needed to provide raises over the past 11 years. In some instances, they provided additional funding so we could do raises beyond what the state was actually paying. What we know now is the state is facing a revenue challenge this year, and that revenue challenge may move forward into next year as well. The city is also facing the increased VRS rates that come at a cost, as well as an increase in health insurance rates. So while they continue to be very supportive of the school division, it may be very difficult for them to provide additional funding for us moving into the fiscal year 21 budget. So just a brief summary, we are going to continue to gather budget input, whether you're a faculty member, staff, parent, or community member. You may go on to our website and find Let's Talk and provide input through that tool, or certainly you could give me a call or email, or if you see me in the community, don't hesitate to stop and provide your input to me, and the same would be true for school board members and other school division employees. My proposed budget that I likely will release on March 17th will be based on the information we have at the time, which would include our new enrollment projections. The General Assembly is in the long session, and they are scheduled to end their session on March 7th, which means I should be able to do a budget based on the final work of the General Assembly, but if they do for some reason extend the session, that might become challenging. I do want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this budget update. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any suggestions or questions about the budget that we're currently developing for the next school year.